Look at that cloud. I was just looking at this cloud and it was just making me happy. I don't know why. 'Cause I thought it was so, I don't know, something about it. It's like there's no other clouds. It's just this one. Well, there's one over there, a little dinky one. But it's like this huge, thick. Well, not huge. It's thick, distinct. It's not moving very much because it's kind of dead air. You know, it's like pretty hot today. I'm just looking at this big cloud, and I've been very aware of my thoughts lately, trying to understand the various feelings and thinking about why we're happy. And a lot of times my thoughts return to organization. And I think of what L. Ron Hubbard said about survival. What is survival? In other words, progress. Seems like when you're progressing, surviving is a word. You know, staying alive, but it seems like it's not just the status quo, which you'd think that would be like peace, right? But whenever you sort of go backwards, and like your house gets dirty, or you fall down, or you feel like you can't achieve your goal, I think that's what brings unhappiness a lot. And so sometimes we take a lot of, we kind of give up and just lay down and quit, and then revert to this thing we use like pleasures, maybe just some kind of modern chemicals that mimic joy, but they're not. They're just stimulating the brain, and you're not really accomplishing anything. It's an illusion. And then when the thing wears off, you become addicted. So that can be an extreme sadness when you're addicted and you can't make any progress. But it seems like just even going up and cleaning the house makes you feel better. But it's not even just that. Like, say if you have a lot of bills and things are just going wrong, you're not happy. And people think, oh, it's a chemical imbalance. No, you're not happy because things aren't going well, and you need to organize your life. Because I think the thing of it is we need to be progressing and going forward and reaching our goals and other people liking us and stuff, That seems to have something to do with progress too. But it also has to do with another little word called self-awareness. Because remember, the animals are not self-aware. Well, some of them are more self-aware. I have seen that my dog have self-awareness. My Buster, well, he's smart. And I don't see every dog quite as smart as certain dogs that are smarter. But everybody was telling me, oh, keep that dog, he's a male, and he might eat those little babies. And of course the mothers were, they wouldn't let Buster close to the puppies. And he would whimper, he would, and I thought, what, he does that. He talks. He growls, and he talks about, he's very, emotional, and you can hear and see him, the way he's feeling when he's sad, or he needs something, or he wants something. If he's hungry, he'll come in and go, and I know he's hungry. Or if he wants something, it doesn't have to be, he's desiring something. And it's not out of pure lust. It seems like out of love, because he worried about these little puppies when one of the little puppies would crawl out and be all by himself. And he'll start whimpering and looking at that little puppy, and he'll go over there. So one day, I wasn't right there with the puppies, and one of the little puppies was out quite a ways from the other puppies and just crawled his way out and was kind of whimpering and lost. And Buster was just standing there, like over him, just looking around, like, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I need to protect this little puppy." And he started whimpering, and he reached down and licked it and looked up around and wondered, is anybody gonna, like, I don't want to pick the dog up and move him because that's not my job, and the mommies might get mad, but I'm worried about this puppy. Somebody come help this puppy. He was just so worried. And I've never seen, so I don't even worry about Buster at all. He'll go over there and lick him and take care of him. Like, I could tell from the very minute those babies were coming that he knew he was about to have babies. It's weird. You said, well, how would he know that? Even if he had other lives as dogs, dogs don't know they're going to have babies. It just happens, right? Well, if they don't know, then why is it that mother prepares? Every mother dog prepares for birth. They'll go and they'll make a little area to have the babies. They know what's inside of them. They can feel them. And it seems like they have instinctual knowledge and love for those puppies, real love. But anyway, so they do have self-awareness. I got off on that. But self-awareness meaning that they're aware of things, that it isn't just some program. They're not just doing, my chickens are mostly just programmed. They're just bark, 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 running around trying to find food and water, and it's hard to even teach them anything. You can say no when they look at you like, what? Are you kidding me? What are you saying? I don't know what you mean. Like, they just keep coming back. You scare them off, they'll come back. They never really learn. It looks like. I have noticed that they do learn a little. And then I've also noticed that, because you'll find that they say that a lot of times birds are really intelligent. Like, they can teach ravens to put round pegs into round holes instead of square, or push a button with their beak to get certain food and things like this. They're almost as smart as monkeys in certain ways. They've found. But I have noticed that they're not really as smart because their knowledge or their intelligence is focused to stuff like eating, sleeping, and their own needs. It's very narrow. They don't sit around looking up at the sky wondering what clouds are and stuff. But whereas my dogs do seem to do some things like that. So it's like their intelligence is broader. But anyway, what I'm saying about that is that, of course, rocks and trees don't have self-awareness. They're just there. They're experiencing things in a way that is very, very instinctual. They don't have any like they can't change their behavior and get outside of themselves and see themselves. They don't know that they're there. They don't even know it's like consciousness. They're not even really conscious, self-conscious. They don't have any shame. They don't wish they hadn't done that. They don't anticipate death or worry. So in a sense, they're all happy. The trees and the flowers are happy. That's why you can take a fish and catch it, put a hook in its lip, and it wiggles. It sensory perception. It acknowledges pain, but I don't know that they actually feel the pain because this, not in the way that we do. I mean, they feel it in a mechanical sense, and they know that their instinctual nature is to get away from that because that could cause them to, their instinctual nature is to survive, and they're following their program, but they don't just stop and greet each other and talk about the old days and mate for life or anything like that. I don't really think they do stuff like that. They don't nurture their young. They don't have what do they say, breasts to nurture their young. So I think there's a difference between animals that don't have mammary glands and they don't have a way to cuddle and nurture their young and care for their young. That's a different sort of progress in evolution. But we develop awareness slowly. I'm sure there are some slight bit of awareness, in every animal of some kind. I doubt whether trees are at the level where we could say they're any kind of self-awareness. But I do think that dogs are smart and have some kind of self-awareness. They regret certain things. They care about their children. They care about their owners. They miss them. They ponder things a little bit. And there's a lot of instinctual nature going on there too. What am I talking about that for? Well, because we're talking about happiness. Now, if you look at the tree, is the tree happy? That's that neutral. It's neither sad nor happy. The pain doesn't bother it. You can chop a tree down. It doesn't feel any real emotional pain. It doesn't ponder the fact that it's dying. It doesn't feel sorry or sad. But it doesn't feel happy. Whereas dogs will feel sad and happy. Chickens don't appear to be either happy or sad very much. I have seen them running play and it looks like they're happy. And of course they'll get into arguments and fights with each other. So they are experiencing emotion, which is, I guess, some form of self-awareness. They're fighting over their territory and stuff. We don't know how much of that's just instinctual. But so the neutral's where you don't want to be. But it isn't a bad place if you're a tree or whatever, you're not going to feel pain, but you're also not going to feel any progress. You're not going to notice that or be aware that you're making progress. So you're not going to be happy. You're not going to feel pleasure or joy as a tree. But as an animal, you might feel a little bit of that. But as a human, I think, because if you notice animals like dogs and things, they can get sad for a moment, but they really don't look like they spend a lot of time in depression. I suppose if you locked a dog up, tied him up behind the house, and he never got off, and I've heard dogs, they'll howl and they'll cry, and yeah, they're depressed. That takes a lot to depress a dog. You got to really tie him up and beat him, and they'll get over things quickly, not like humans. A human will miss their mother or their wife or something for years and years. They'll mourn. They ponder the situation. They don't live in the moment. They're living in the past, and that can be a hindrance. For long periods of years, they can be just depressed. And so all the anxiety and everything going on around them, they're feeling it. They're like, and so what is that feeling? We call it feeling, touching, but it's not the touch feeling, but the emotional feeling. And so what is that? Well, it is energy. So it's like we're bigger antennas. We're absorbing all this energy from people. You see somebody walk up to you and they're happy. They're smiling. They've got a lot of emotion. And we feel happy when they're happy. If you see somebody angry and yelling and screaming, you don't feel comfortable. So we're like an antenna. We don't think of it that way, but that's what emotion is. You feel it. We're all psychic, but we're all empaths. We're all sympaths. But the only difference is that some people just experience it and have no clue what they're doing. They just react to it. And others are beginning to understand that these feelings are coming from certain things and sources. So as you get more aware, I think you become more aware of why things are happening to you. Become more aware of your emotions and why your emotions are the way they are. You get smarter and you start realizing, I don't want to be around negative things and negative people. Or you begin to really get smart and realize that you can be around negative people, but you've got to be the broadcaster. You can't shut down your positive around somebody that's very negative. because you'll just become, if you're the anoid, you're going to pick up their negativity. You've got to be the cathode, and you've got to broadcast your happiness. So you come along somebody who's angry or sad, or you run over there and put your arm around them and say, no, it's okay. Everything's going to be all right. Or you smile and say, hey, I love you. And somehow you can literally lift that person up. So it's an energy, and it's no different than electrical energy. It's no different. I mean, it's just different wavelengths. We talk about radio waves and gamma rays, and so television waves, you send signals on the waves. Now, in ancient times, they didn't use all this modern stuff like wires and man-made technology, because it's in nature itself. It's already there. The world's already a computer. There's energy everywhere. And thank goodness the Lord didn't make hundreds of volts somewhere coming out of the ground, because then you'd walk up, touch a tree, and it'd shock you to death. You cannot be shocked by anything, because everything in the world is insulated. So you're only going to get 1 volt at the surface of the earth, or at the surface of anything, around your body, or up over the truck, up over the trees, 1 volt. But beyond the tree, or beyond the ground, or beyond any point, 1 meter, there's 100 volts, but you can't reach it no matter where you go. If you get a wire and you stick it up in the air 3 feet, you're still not touching it, because that 1 volt is going to hug the contour of the ground, your body, and the wire. So at the tip of the wire, it's still just 1 volt. And that's that insulator around everything. It's inside that you are going to find the vortice, which is the negative and the positive wavelengths. And since humans have the whole macrocosm in this little microcosm, then our head is the positive and our feet is the negative. And our feet touch the ground, which is the negative. You can pull electricity out of the air to the ground in certain unusual circumstances. Lightning does it through static electricity, through rubbing, through friction. So the ancient ones knew, like there were Native American tribes that would take little crystals, quartz crystals, very small quartz crystals, like little pebbles. They would make I think like a deer skin or something rattle. It was kind of see-through. And they would put the crystals inside it and shake it, make a shaker, a rattle. And when they would rattle it, the quartz crystals would bang together, and that causes the friction. And so quartz is made out of silicon, and it's a very good conductor. And the atomic structure of the silicon is interesting because it is the form of a pyramid. That's why I believe that, well, I want to do a little more research into that, because I think that's probably the most powerful shape or form that you can. What we're trying to do is make antennas to pull the electrical out of the air some way. And as I said before, if you took a copper wire or anything straight up in the air, a long ways up, the higher you go, that contour as it goes up over the wire is becoming, at the peak, you're making angles that are, and you're stretching that insulator till it gets thinner and thinner. At some point, that electrical charge gets so powerful, you're up there at thousands of volts, it will actually go right in through like it'll find ground. So that's why when you have a metal pole on top of the barn, it's a lightning rod, because when there is too much electricity or static gets charged, there's too much charge, it's got to find ground. So what we're trying to do is make a ground and do it in with a dissimilar metal than where the positive will be. We need to find these vortices, and where, because the whole earth is a vortice, your body's a vortice. You could find ground in your body, your feet touch the ground, and so that electricity goes through you. You can find that in every thing, but some things have more energy than others. And like I say, quartz is that particular. Well, like we know, copper is a conduit. Water is a conduit. Certain things are conduits. But the best conduit is a quartz crystal. So today we still harness this power in computers. They use sand. That's what the original chips were made of, just ground up sand. Sand is little bitty pieces of quartz. Originally, they used to use quartz crystals in watches to keep time. Why? Because there's an energy wavelength that will set, in certain rhythms, that will set the time. And it's not just, we say, well, there's rhythms, so what? Well, those rhythms are wavelengths of energy. So it is literally the quartz crystals producing energy. And when the two quartz crystals come together, they make a spark. So the Indian peoples would shake their rattle, and their rattles would start sparking, or not really wouldn't spark, it would glow. And it was through things like that over the centuries that mankind began to realize that these things were in nature. So 1,000 years ago, let's say they didn't have light bulbs and batteries in cars. Well, that's because they weren't that stupid. They didn't do it and manufacture it. They didn't think that somehow or other they could make a copy of reality and it would be better than reality. They used the natural resources. So we've got the Mexican temples that they find these crystal skulls. Nobody knows why. They're perfectly made in such precision that we don't think we would be able to do it today. And it's that perfect precision that gives you the real strength. So light will come and refract through the crystal. What is light? Light is the vibration of this energy. It's a very high vibration, the highest light vibration. And as you slow that vibration down, it goes all the way down into hard substances like uranium. So everything's got this power in it. Just that everything doesn't have an opposite or a negative pole easily available, so you can extract it. When you burn a piece of wood on the fire, you're extracting the energy in it. It's like you found because of the heat, it's like it's just making the energy just flow quickly, and it's very volatile, wood. Wood just burns right up. Metal won't burn up, but if you could get the electrical current flowing out of the metal, you might have a far more charge than wood. Like a uranium bomb would blow up cities, or a nuclear bomb. So this energy's in everything. You just have to find the negative pole and the positive pole and have some ability to access it. And that's why we need an antenna. Now, quartz crystals, then, are like an antenna. They're receiving this energy, and they're retaining that energy. So if you were to send thoughts of love, which is energy, it will ride in that same vortex of energy that's in the earth. If you can make a smaller little bubble and somehow make contact or make it your ground, all your thoughts can be transmitted into that crystal, those feelings, in the form of feelings. Now, modern technicians do it in the form of little ones and zeros or whatever, and it's like a little code, and they can interpret the code and put it on the screen and recreate a picture that way. So when you have a computer that's putting pictures on the screen, you're watching a movie, it's just pictures, right? Well, it is the appearances. Just like physical matter is just a physical appearance. It isn't real. It's just an image. You're just taking that image and receiving it through an antenna, which is a computer chip, and having certain grounds and resistors and cathodes and all these different things that they're using to draw that energy wavelength into a computer where it's like a little battery. You're bending light. You're capturing it so that you can now guide that particular energy wave onto a computer screen. You're literally transferring the energy. That's all it really is. That is power, free energy, just as much as high voltage. High voltage is just another frequency of the same power that's endless and free everywhere around us. So, everything being energy, then we are energy. But what we are is the pure energy that's now communicating with other energies. And being like a male and a female, they're becoming one. Or they're learning from each other, or they're communicating. They're transferring energy. And with the two energies, the two dissimilar energies, you produce the real power. You produce love, which is the divine being, which is mind, which is self-awareness. That's what beings are, self-awareness. So the universe is all just self-awareness. But in some things like trees, it doesn't have a good enough antennae to bring in full emotions and the higher vibrations of being, of true happiness. Happiness is the awakeness. It's the knowing. It's all it is. And depression is literally a degradation, a loss of, if you have any kind of mind or thoughts or knowing, and then because you know, you realize that you're forgetting that or going in the wrong direction. There's a force. You're feeling it. It's a negative energy, and it's draining you, literally draining you, and you're corroding, you're degrading, you're not progressing, you're losing the progress. You're not progressing. So what we call depression or anything like that, that's the negative feeling. It's the draining. You're losing power. And so what we think of as depression is a lack of progress, a lack of organization, a lack of flow, free flow from the negative to the positive, the progress. And you don't want the pulling. You don't want the lustful feelings that pull you into this rigid form that is just death. You want the higher frequency of love, which is giving, which makes you flowing like a river and becoming powerful, which means you've got to marry your conscious mind with the superconscious, with a higher consciousness. You've got to marry the positive with the negative to become powerful, and powerful, more energy, means that you're experiencing or feeling or touching or communicating. And when you're communicating, there's only one difference between communicating and not communicating, and that is simply knowing whether you're communicating. So awareness is simply the feeling of communicating. Awareness is simply touching and then making the spark. And that spark is the communication. It's the two chemicals coming together and causing maybe gases or corrosion. So the one substance changes and becomes one with the other substance, and they share the energy. And through that sharing is knowing, lifting the veil of the wife and having the orgasm, because now the male and the female come together and become one. They know each other. That's what we were saying the other day, is that in the Bible it uses the word knowing someone to mean sex. So there is a sex that's higher than just physical. That can cause a great deal of physical pleasure, but it can also be very addictive. It's the lower carnal feelings. But the higher vibrations, they are also a coming together, and we call it sympathy or love. That's the highest power in the universe. It is light, because the divine being is light. The divine being is spirit, which means mind. And the divine being is love, which is also the highest form of energy. Love, light, all of those things describe the highest form of energy, which is the divine what? Being. So being is reality, the light. And that is full of absolute brightness, knowing, consciousness, awareness. But the lower carnal nature is the physical, the uranium, the iron, the copper, the rocks, the dirt. And man was made from the elements, the dirt, and breathed with the breath of life and became a living soul or an immortal soul. That's what living means, immortal. Because anything that's living is not going to ever die. So Adam had the spirit and the elemental, and they came together. And then Adim, being plural, was cut in half, and the whole became male and female. And so the universe is distinguishing all of its parts. That's what the universe is, and that's awareness. And so when the two come together, it causes the orgasm or the happiness. So the animals are receptors of that energy, but they don't have as good of antenna. They're not picking up the higher forms or the love as much or the sheer joy, the absolute knowing that humans have. I mean, speculating and contemplating life itself. That is what energy is, life itself. So we can use this knowledge to understand the physical world and how to make little antennas to pull energy. But we have to understand that it isn't just the physical, powerful, violent energy that we should be interested in. Because in the more subtle, higher vibrations is the power, but it's latent. You have to direct it with an antennae. And so a human being made in the image of the divine is the whole microcosm of the entire macrocosm. We have pure access to the light. And therefore, with our minds, we can literally do anything. So why would we need tools and physical things? We can move mountains with our word. But how do we move the physical, the mountain, the insurmountable? Appears to be, right? It's big and heavy. Uranium, gold, lead. It's heavy. It's big. It's all that encumbersome material thing that's so scary, but is not really the right power, because the power comes from the mind that uses the word. How does the mind, what is the mind? The mind is you. More accurately, the reality before it has become manifest. It's just in its highest vibration of unmanifested thinking and thoughts. You haven't yet spoken the word, nor imagined it with emotions and desire. So when you, as a being, form the images in your mind, you speak them with your word, you must ground that power that you are, and boom, those thoughts become reality. How do you ground? Well, we got to have negative and positive, or we don't accomplish, we don't create, we don't become and progress and organize. So what do we do to ground it? We think it, we speak it, then we believe it, and with that emotion, we participate in it, we act upon it. It's really that electromagnetism that pulls that the will or the dream, the plan, it pulls it into form by thinking about it and getting emotionally involved in it. The emotions pull it. The desire pulls it into form. We think it. But in order to make it, those thoughts, material, in order for it to happen in the material, it has to have a ground, which is to have this emotional bubble, which is that electrical current that holds it all together in this physical form. That's that lust, that's that magnetism, which is desire. But the problem is there's two kinds of things that act this way. One is desire out of believing, out of hope, out of faith. And the other is something that we think or believe because of fear. And the fear is the negative, and it creates these monsters. The only difference is knowledge. So progression is knowledge. Because when you have knowledge, then you know what's causing the degradation is the fear, the negative, without properly being controlled and led by the higher mind. And it cannot be led by the higher mind without knowing, gnosis. So self-awareness is what gives us the happiness, or gives us the key to only go by faith. And so the negative is really belief. When you believe something, that's the way it is. That's the negative. That's what brings it into the form. It just depends on what you believe, based on what you know. If you believe in monsters, that's not really true. It's a lie. You're being deceived, but because you believe it, you are the sovereign. You will create the monster. You wouldn't create monsters on purpose, but out of ignorance, out of fear, out of assuming, out of believing that you're not powerful. But once you know that you are powerful, you can no longer be deceived. So your being cannot manifest its loving, natural, harmonious self if it's stuck in the illusion or bubble of fear that creating the monsters. But it is desire that is the negative. Lust. Lust isn't always bad. You must lust or desire something for it to happen. But you must desire it from the point of view of giving. You must want only what is in faith. According to your faith, may it be so. But if it's according to fear, you will manifest strange monsters and horrible, deformed things that are against nature. Because whatever you believe will happen. Belief itself is that negative pole that causes it to form from the desire. But if the desire is in faith, then you get what you really want, and it manifests. If this power that you're using to manifest is fear, then you're basically saying, I'm creating something that I don't want. I don't have somehow I cannot. You've made yourself believe that you cannot manifest what you want. And you're instead manifesting what you do not want, because you literally will not allow your mind to be free and at rest. Well, why? Because you don't have knowledge. Once you know this principle, that you can manifest what you want, then you do. So long as you don't fall into being afraid by some trick by deception, by not knowing, and manifesting what you do not want. We enjoy being in the flesh, and we want to have a marriage with the physical, and we want not to be ignorant of the spiritual. We want to know her. We want to have communion with her. We have communion with the Lord. It's kind of the same thing because we're the bride. It's all symbolic of the same thing. So the communion is what we're after, but it doesn't mean we're ever going to change the fact that the universe is going to stay this way, and there's always going to be this communication. There's always going to be the negative and the positive, and the learning and the growing. As long as you're growing in knowledge, as long as you're feeling and receiving that energy, then you're giving more energy. And it's an infinite source. We can grow and have children forever and ever and ever, and progress for eternity. It's eternal progress. And when we're in that eternal progress, we're happy. We're making love. We're having the orgasm of life because we're progressing. Stagnation causes death. So what is happiness? It is feeling. It is opening up your energy and opening up the gates of your body to receive the powerful energy all around you, the love. And we do that with thanksgiving. And what does that mean? It means that we're opening up the dam for the river of life to flow. The river of life is the thoughts from the positive. And if we're dwelling on the lower, stagnant water of negativity, we stagnate, we stop progressing, and that's where we feel that negative energy. We don't know what it is, so we're depressed, but that's what it is. It's that negative energy. So you're going to, no matter who you are, you're going to have ups and downs to some extent. But if you're on an upward path, then your downs are really, really much higher than where you started, but lower than where you're going to be next as you make your move. You're bouncing off the negative and going forward. They're not really lows at all. They're new highs that become old lows. So if you say, I need fire. Now, it's not total depression because you don't have fire. It's simply a knowing you don't have fire, which if it's followed by I am the one who's in charge and I can go and get sticks and build a fire, then you have no problem. You're happy. You just go out and get the sticks and you understand this process. So there's the negative and the positive. But now if you would say, I need fire and I feel helpless and I can't get fire, now you're going to start feeling that negative feeling. You might interpret it as, I feel negative because if I don't get the fire started, I can't eat. I might freeze to death. So it's just me realizing that I could die. That's kind of right, except you're being deceived because you're not aware, I guess, that you do have fire available to you. The Lord never made a universe where everything you need is not available anytime you need it. But don't hoard it, because that means you're afraid you're going to lose it. But if you know that you can never lose it, that you are the source, then you'll never be afraid again. But the question is how do we stay happy? By knowing that there is in the universe the negative and the positive, and that there's nothing to worry about, and that you bounce from the negative to the positive. It's eternal progression. You don't have any fears. Fear just means stagnation, but you don't have to stagnate. Once you become aware, self-aware, that you're the being, once you become a great antenna and you begin to receive that flow of energy, that thoughts, and you know how to direct it with knowledge, because knowledge means eternal life. And so you don't consider not having a fire something that's going to debilitate you. It's just a moment of and then boom, you make the next step of getting the fire. But if you feel helpless or you're deceived into thinking you can't get fire, then you're going to be in this state of depression. So it's literally the knowing that makes us happy. constant knowing and the believing and the faith. And with that faith, we realize that knowing that highest power, which is love and giving and understanding and wisdom and joy and all those things that are higher vibrations, we understand that what to use that for, what those thoughts are, their life. And we go out and lay in the sun and we enjoy it. Now, what if you couldn't feel the sun? What if you didn't know that you got to get out in the sun to feel that beauty? You couldn't feel that wonderful feeling of sunshine. Or what if you went to a beautiful place in the forest and saw a waterfall and a little deer drinking out of a brook, and you didn't even feel moved by it at all? You didn't feel any compassion, or you didn't giggle within yourself, and you weren't delighted to see that little creature. You didn't share his joy. Well, then what would happen? Well, maybe you'd go the other route and you'd be like, ah, and you'd go over there and jump on it and kill it and eat it. Okay, now that's negative. That's the animalistic. And there's a certain amount of pleasure in eating up the energy that way, and you're receiving the energy. But because you're doing it in such a violent way, you're eating up low currents, your carnal, the lower nature. You're getting quick bursts of pleasure that, like drugs or chemicals that aren't the natural pathway to happiness, they just give you, like, they short you out, like zap, zap, and you're dead. Then you got to lie around and sleep from your gluttony and feel morally negative and depressed about what you did. But if you weren't really intelligent, if you had no knowing, you might not even realize, because you're not even making contact with the higher self. You're just down here in the lower self, and that's what uranium and iron and trees, they don't have that higher consciousness, so they're not feeling anything. You're just putting yourself down there, your mind, your consciousness, in this place where it's not aware that it can be the living particle, the happiness. You're not feeling the higher frequencies. The higher frequencies being knowing, giving, making decisions, being self-aware. That's the higher knowing. It's much better than the vampirism and the orgies of lust upon the earth. Those only bring little bursts of energy, but they also take energy too much. They destroy someone else, so that other people, like the animal, the one animal destroys the other animal and takes all of its energy in lust. Well, the physical part of that being can be nurtured or nourished by the physical properties of the other animal, but you're not nurturing the higher frequencies. And so in your mind, you're not feeling the love, and therefore that part of you is dying. You're becoming more carnal, more earthly, more physical, rather than spiritual. And you live and you die that way. You live for a short time and you die. It's a dog eat dog, right? The lion eats the goat, and the wolf eats the lamb, and they only live a short time and they die. And that's the nature that's ruling over us. That's the deities of this world, the astrological carnal natures, that people are trying to see their fortune when they're asking these spirits, what are you going to give me? Well, they're going to give you a little bit of pleasure, and then you're going to die. Fortune, and then it's going to rot. Right? Where the pleasures of this world brings temporary pleasure, but it rusts. Even the metal will rust into the ground. And anything living will just die. It will nourish it, the physical part of it, But because it doesn't have the higher part, the body part dies. You have to maintain the spiritual, mental part that radiates the physical body so that the physical body never dies. If you're only the negative, the battery dies. You've got to have a positive current flow. And so it can constantly recharge itself. So people who get involved in sexual orgies and gluttony and this kind of thing, they enjoy it for a while, but then their body begins to die because they've cut off contact from the spiritual, from the giving, from the love, from the sympathy, from the empathy, from the communion, from the sex, the real sex, the higher sex, the communion with the spiritual. They lost sight of the spiritual, and then their physical body dies. That's all right. The physical or the spiritual you will incarnate in another physical and try another time. But if that spiritual part of yourself hasn't learned to have that faith, if you haven't risen your spiritual self high enough to that higher awareness yet, then when you incarnate, you'll just simply do the same thing again, like a ravenous beast. But it takes years of evolution and learning and trial and error, and you grow and your knowledge expands. And when you get that higher knowledge, what it is the knowledge that you must progress and love. So whenever you're loving one and other people, you're going to receive. If you're doing good to others, you're going to receive good to yourself. If you're praying that your neighbor is safe, you're going to be safe. If you're giving them your bread, you're going to receive bread. And that's what makes you happy, the equal flow. It's only the stagnation that makes you unhappy. So that's what causes depression. Depression could be from drinking and gluttony and doing things that you feel helpless to quit. Anxiety because of troubles that are coming. So the only way out of this is really to get out of this world. Because in this world, it's based upon buying and selling and debt and hate and war. So the whole mindset's got to be abandoned. And so what do? Well, we go out into the world. What? Why the world? Well, anywhere, wherever you are you, and the universe is all around you. And where you're standing right now, instead of just being inside of this carnal flesh and doing what the carnal part of you demands, and not being married or knowing or being aware of the higher part of yourself, or you're not giving, you're not loving, and your physical body is just going to be in this state of deterioration and corruption. And that's that negative force that you're feeling. When you put an ohm meter and you see it's negative, that's what you're feeling. This is negative energy. It's real. You're like an anoid that your body is literally starting to die. Like your skin starts to dry out and your hair falls out and your teeth and your bones. Do you know that the bones are a lot like quartz? They're made of similar, silicon and carbon, and they're able to store that energy like a computer chip. So we can build a computer much better than Hewlett-Packard or whatever modern computers they have these days, or Google or Microsoft or whatever. They're mimicking nature, and they're making a small counterfeit. They can do very little. All it does is show you an illusion on a screen. Maybe it's like a calculator. It can be helpful, but it's much better if you take nature itself has provided quartz crystals. And you say, well, how do you get the wire to hook it up? Well, actually you could. I mean, they do it in computers, with electric wires connecting the computer chips and soldering and all that. Yeah, you can do all that if you want to, but you don't need to. You can just simply hold the quartz crystal in your hand and feel. If you're more aware, you'll feel it. If you pay attention, you'll receive a higher frequency, higher vibration, happiness, you'll notice the difference if your intent is pure. And then that same quartz crystal that you held in your hand and you blessed, if you give it to another, they can also receive that good energy. Remember, energy is infinite. It will last forever. The thoughts that are encrypted in that crystal will be there. But you don't even have to touch the crystal. If you are aware of the highest frequencies, which is, the light goes through the air. It doesn't need a wire. See, it just, it's there. The lower frequencies travel through conduits because they're physical, material. Thoughts don't need wires. With your thoughts, you can do anything. You can move mountains. That's that energy that's up in the air, but you don't even notice it's there, but it's making life and creating trees and forming the whole physical universe. It's very powerful, but it does it without violence. There's no sparks when the trees grow, when a little grain sprouts from the ground, right? There's no sparks. It's just beautiful magic. It's not really magic. It's just the divine energy that's everywhere. And if you're patient and you're aware, you can have that frequency that everything you touch grows and everybody you meet loves you, and that happiness will well up within you, and you'll always be happy because you're not dwelling on anything negative. You don't believe in negative things because you know what they are. They're physical, carnal things that you're in charge of. You don't worry about things you're already in charge of, unless you're schizophrenic. But when you start worrying about things that you shouldn't be worrying about, the little birds, they're not worried about too much. And they can have little orgasms of happiness because they're not inanimate. They're conscious beings. They have some happiness. But humans, we can have much more happiness than that. You don't see humans today dancing around a fire, do you? Why? Because we don't take advantage of the higher things. We don't have time to go out in the woods and build a fire and all dance and sing, hold hands and care for one another and ask each other if we need anything. And we don't get any joy of helping people. We don't have any joy to see another person smile anymore. We walk into a grocery market, somebody smiles at us, that person's the positive one, and they're lifting us up. At least it didn't make us angry because they smiled. But let one person in that store look at you sideways and bam, it sets you off. You pick up that negative energy because you're a receptor for it. Because of your thoughts, because of what you believe. But on the other hand, if you went into that market and you saw somebody look at you sideways and you go, oh, that person needs my help. I'm a powerful being. And you look back and you smile and you say, I love you. You've just lifted that person up. And you do not go into that negative condition, but you overcome the negative with the positive. And every thought can be done in the same way. If you have a bill, you got 2 or 3 choices. A bill that you can't pay. Either you say, well, I can't pay it at the moment, right? I need more of this thing they call cash. And if I choose to live in a system where the only way to survive and live and have the things and the resources is to become a slave and purchase these things and divide it up for a price, then I'll have to play the game. Pay Caesar's things to Caesar. You're going to have anxiety in order to pay the rent if you don't have enough money. Money is just something that gives you great pleasure when you got a lot of it, and then when it runs out, you're very depressed. The only way to really be happy then, and I tell you this the truth, you can't, all these people, these self-help gurus that tell you, oh, do this, that, and the other thing, and you'll be happy living in your mansion with your Bentley, right, or your Tesla. You can find happiness. No, you can't. You really can never find happiness in this world. The only way out of it is to literally free yourself of as much of this negative influence as you can. It doesn't mean we can't enjoy the material, but we don't imprison ourselves into the material. We don't go by the rules of the law of Moses or the law of the land or the carnal things. But we let the Spirit guide the flesh. So we believe and trust in our mind, in our will, and our love and our giving. And we don't worry about what the material things can do to us or how it can harm us. So we don't feel sad in any way because we're aware that the mind is the answer. And so therefore we don't purposefully put ourselves in a society or go by the rules of a world that is basically lame, blind. When Jesus came and healed the blind and the lame, and the deaf, he was talking about you're blind, deaf, and lame. Why? Because you're grounded in this stagnant world and you're not aware of the Christ consciousness in you. And that's all it really is. Beautiful creature. It's a little vortex of life with the divine mind within it. But it hasn't yet developed the higher frequencies of love yet, the fullness of it. But it's still a beautiful little creature. And even though that little creature doesn't know a lot about love, it does know that it's alive and it needs to feel happy. And because we're higher beings, we like to see everything around us. It's all an extension of us. We want everything to be happy. We want this ecology to be fine-tuned and harmonized with our 10-string harp. We need to play upon our 10-string harp. We're going to get into the book of Psalms, go, I guess, starting from, what is it, chapter 38, where we left off, or 40? I don't remember. I think 38. And you'll see where it talks about everything that Revelation talks about with the 10-string harp and all the different things that Revelation talks about. Well, you get into the book of Psalms and it really opens up. It explains it deeper. And we'll get the real meaning of what that book of Revelation is about, friends. Anyway, I think I'll just leave it here, guys. There comes some more of those clouds. Just beautiful and fluffy, aren't they? They make me happy just looking at them. So powerful and yet peaceful, serene. Oh. Sometimes we just need to stop playing the television or the radio or the phone or whatever and just be quiet and just receive the beautiful energies around us. Take your shoes off and get grounded. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow. Lord bless you.